In this Gold Belt video, I will walk through how to test a shareable package in JavaScript using Node. I have the project open for testing existing functionality as a part of JavaScript here. To get started with, I do need to run npmi, so let's go and do that really quickly. Hopefully this won't take very long. When we're looking at testing JavaScript applications, especially class libraries, we don't oftentimes have a main method, much like most other shareable packages. We're looking for entry points. What are the types that represent how do we call into this? How do we start with this particular library? So there's a few things that we can do to check this out to see what's going on. Let me just start off by creating the test as we typically would. Create a new file. This is ProcessSubscriptions test.js. And let's go and install our libraries. You could use Ava, you could use Jest, you could use Mocha with Chai, you could use whatever testing framework you want. You could just use the built-in Node tests. I'll do Mocha with Chai. Go and import. And we will describe process subscriptions. We'll say successfully. All right, so in here, what we're looking for is our entry point into the application. So the class library, again, we don't have a main method and we don't have endpoints that we're looking for. So what we're looking for is some sort of public type or public method that lets us know how to call into that thing. So as we're exploring through this, we could just start typing things and see if we could figure out what's there, start importing things, but it's a little bit of hit and miss. Certainly you could start doing that. But if you have the code itself, which you will, because if it's either in the code you're testing or it'll be in Node modules and you can explore from there. What we're looking for is a public method or class. Public meaning it's exported. So in the JavaScript world, we're looking for what has been exported. So looking at the root, there's no index.js, and that's the first thing I would look. At the index.js, sometimes there will be things exported from the root. So let's move into main. And again, I'm looking for an index.js file. So an index.js file, if there's one inside a folder, oftentimes that will be used to export types publicly out of that particular module. We don't have one. So instead, we have to look at the specific JS files to see what's exported. So credit cards and data, those sound like subdomains for what we're looking for. Subscription billing, those sounds like the main thing. And it even matches the folder name up here. So that's likely what we're looking for. So I'm going to start with subscriptionbilling.js. And I'm going to go to the very end. I'm going to look for what's exported. And sure enough, we have two different things that are exported in this particular module. We have ProcessSubscriptions, which is a function, and then we have Watchdog Processor, which is a class. So looking at the Watchdog Processor, let's take a look and see what we have here. Watchdog Processor has a construction that needs a begin date, an end date, and some remittance customers. So in order to use the Watchdog Processor constructor, we'd have to already have remittance customers. Now we might be able to do that, but it feels like there's probably a step that we should have already done. So that doesn't necessarily feel like the easiest entry point into this. So we'll make a note of that. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Looking otherwise, are there any static methods? And it turns out there are not. There's this async try build customers, but that's an instance method. So I already have to have an instance of the Watchdog Processor. So Watchdog Processor, I could create it with the constructor, but that doesn't seem promising. Let's look at ProcessSubscriptions now. Looking at this, it needs a billing through date and a billing start date. So basically 2 dates. Now that feels a little bit more promising. It also returns a Watchdog Processor. That's really promising. And actually, speaking of promising, that should be a promise of a Watchdog Processor since this is an async function. So that sounds about right. So we're going to give it billing dates, and we'll notice that if these are provided, which means these are probably not required, I could probably pass null or just not pass anything on the ProcessSubscriptions. So knowing it's an async, knowing it gives us the Watchdog Processor back, this looks like what I'm looking for in terms of calling into the functionality. So let's import the ProcessSubscriptions now into our test. And that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you, AI. So we want the ProcessSubscriptions from, go back to subscription billing, and then actually we don't want that. It's not quite right. Go back into main, and then subscriptionbilling.js. So from here, we do need this to be async because we're going to call into an async method. And we'll say processor equals await ProcessSubscriptions. I could pass some arguments. I'm going to leave it empty for now. We can always pass arguments later, but that basically calls into it. So now my processor, I have the get successful, the get customers with errors. Now I can do the assertions I need to do. Now I've called into it. So that's the idea. Again, we're looking for a class that has a constructor that's easy to call. or we're looking for a class. Well, let me back up. First off, we're looking for what's exported. These are the public types. On those, we're looking for potentially a class with a constructor that's easy to call, or we're looking for a class with a static method that makes sense to give us back what we're looking for. Otherwise, in JavaScript, we can also just look for a function that's been exported. And that's what we're doing in this particular case. A function is a root level function or a global function that we can call directly into on the module. So that's basically it. That's how we're going to start our tests in JavaScript. You can use that approach whenever you're looking at new code to try to figure out how do you call into this thing.